Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Potluck. My name is Erik Christopher Myers, and I am your host, and I am apologizing for that in advance. Today, we're going to be talking about something that is going to be incredibly exciting, particularly to our younger viewers: books. Put down the mouse, get your thumb off the screen. This is going to be more interesting than it sounds, I promise. Specifically, we're going to be talking about creative types, authors, and how they find their audience in the changing landscape of publishing versus self-publishing. So I'm surrounded by a number of very talented authors here today who are joining me, and they're going to introduce themselves. So if I could start with this young lady here to my left.
I'm Megan. I'm the author of The Altered Wake, Megan Morgan.
My name is Michael Maloney. I am the author of Mile Marker 10, an Ellicott City mystery, 1908.
Great. I'm Shelley Davies Wygant, and I'm author of Haunted Ellicott City.
I'm Kevin. I write as K. Patrick Glover. I'm the author of A Wicked Little Town, a graphic novel about Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday.
And I'm Gayle. I'm actually the producer of this show, and I don't know why I'm on stage. But I have self-published 2 books with Amazon, Kindle Direct Publishing, and I thought I would just throw in my 2 cents about self-publishing as opposed to finding a publisher.
Well, given the nature of this topic, I thought that it was going to be really important to have some eye candy. So, Michael, Kevin, thank you for being here. I appreciate that very, very much. Let's talk a little bit about sort of where you all are respectively in terms of how you've gotten your books out there. So, several of you have traditional publishers. Several of you have done this all on your own with the advent of spaces like Amazon.com. It's possible for anybody to get their work out there and to be read by anyone. Is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? Because, you know, if anybody can do it, that means anybody can do it. That's a positive thing. But then, of course, it makes it harder sometimes for unique voices to be heard. So, who's done the self-publishing route specifically? All right, so Gayle, this is what, your first book or your second book?
No, I've done 2 so far. One was written under anonymous, and then the other one, which was a genealogical study, I did under my name. I did them both with Amazon. And the interesting thing about self-publishing with Amazon is you have to do the layout with Amazon. Amazon will not do anything for you. You do your own layout. So you have to know how to do layout, desktop publishing. And you have to design your cover. So you have to know a little bit about art and how to design the cover. Then you have to fit it in the requirements of Amazon, because remember, you have bleed space. You have margins that you have to remember. So I do a 6x9, and then I have to remember to leave the bleed space for the cover, because the cover is going to wrap around. So you need to have all of this in your head. So it's self-publishing is not that easy a thing to do. I don't know about other corporations or companies that do self-publishing exactly what they demand of the author, but I know that Amazon wants you do it all. All Amazon does is put it up on their website for sale.
So the really challenging part of that is that you can't just, as an author, concentrate on, you know, what the product is. You've got to oversee the entire thing.
You do the whole thing.
Shelley, for example, you have a publisher, correct?
Right, History Press. And they are sort of, you know, in a box sort of thing. You bring them the topic, and you write it, and they sort of guide you through it. They give you some stylistic things as far as what your manuscript has to be, and you know, word counts and things like that. But other than that, you format it, and then they just flow it into their, you know, program. And their cover thing, they wanted you know, a variety of cover shots, and so I sent them one of the Patapsco Female Institute, and then they made it all creepy. So it was pretty easy.
So do you feel like you have, you know, a certain amount of say in a case like that? You know, I mean, obviously, if you're doing self-publishing, you've got to come up with the entire thing yourself. Mm-hmm. When you're dealing with somebody who's putting your product out there, you know, they're going to be more hands-on. Right. They're going to have more of a say in what you're doing. Whereas, you know, versus here for Kevin, you're doing graphic novels, and well, so you're 100%.
I've done a graphic novel and 2 short story collections. But everything that I've done so far has been a collection of stuff that previously appeared on a website or in a magazine. So it's all gone through the editing process. It's all been accepted by an editor somewhere. I'm just throwing it all together. The graphic novel, I didn't do any of the physical work. The artist did that. Some of the text collections I've gone through Lulu Press and the Amazon Kindle program. Mm-hmm. And yeah, you had to go through the whole layout stuff.
So I guess the main question is, what's easier? Is it, you know, in this day and age, having that flexibility and that ability to just simply put your work out there and have it seen by whomever? Is it easier to do that? You know, there's the plus that you're able to just go with 3 clicks, your stuff is available. But what about marketing? What about trying to get your stuff out there and seen? What have you experienced?
Sure, I think the nuts and bolts of the publishing process, you know, getting it formatted right to upload to KDP, Kindle Direct Publishing, or Barnes & Noble, that's the easy part. I would much have preferred to go to a traditional publisher, but because then you get the whole marketing behind you. You're able to have your books on the shelves in real brick and mortar bookstores. When you're self-published, you have to do it all yourself. So,
and you can get into a traditional bookstore with self-published. You just have to do the legwork. You have to walk around to the bookstores, meet the owners, talk to the people.
Not the big box stores, not the Barnes and Nobles.
No, that's true.
Yeah.
Well, has anybody had any success getting their work into stores? I mean, obviously, Haunted Ellicott City has been, you know, at Barnes & Noble. You know, you did a book signing there recently. But anyone else have any luck with that?
I've been able to get into some smaller, like, mom and pop shops. And, like, I've had a lot of success at, like, signings at comic book stores and things like that. I think that one of the biggest challenges with publishing, whether you go independent or whether you go with like a mainstream big publisher, I think is always going to be the marketing, because I think very, very few authors are fortunate enough to get a big marketing push behind them. So I think that that's always the challenge in, you know, in either publishing or filmmaking or, you know, any of those sort of arts industries. Is it's not just getting your book out there or your product out there, it's getting it into the hands of the right people, of the people who want it and who are going to be enthusiastic about it and who are going to keep following you. So I think that from my perspective, I wanted to go indie, and I'm partially indie. I ended up finding, you know, a smaller indie publisher as I was getting my interior format done. And for me, a huge motivator in going indie was sort of knowing that no matter which route I took, I think that it was always going to be a challenge of finding that audience and getting it to them. And I personally kind of wanted to know that it was all on my shoulders, because it almost always is anyway. So having that responsibility and knowing that that's my job, is finding the people and getting it to them. I was more comfortable with going that direction.
Well, whether you're going indie or you're going with a traditional publisher, I mean, how do you find your audience?
Well,
you know, what are the tools you can use?
Interestingly, when I was in a smaller town, when I released Parenthetically Speaking back in 2011, I was living in a small town in northern Michigan. And I had a lot more success getting into stores and other venues, because it was a smaller community. It was easier to talk to the owners and so forth. It's not quite as easy in a community the size of Baltimore. It's not as personal. I'm in, you know, a couple of comic book shops with Look at Little Town, but it's much more difficult to get in.
Which is really interesting, considering that, you know, as a comic book nerd myself, you know, I buy the monthly books and the twice monthly books. And, you know, what's driving the comic book industry, aside from the movies right now, it's less about the floppies. It's more about how they are packaged every 5 or 10 issues into trade paperbacks and sold in places like Barnes & Noble. So do you find, being that you're atypical from everyone else up here, being that you're a writer of graphic novels, is it harder for you to get that work out there, or do you feel that it's easier?
There's actually an easier venue. I mean, most people know, if they're into comics, where your local comic book store is. Most people don't know where your local independent bookstore is. They buy their books at Amazon, or they buy them at Barnes & Noble. So you might be able to get into an independent bookstore, but you're not going to get in front of as many eyes.
Yeah.
Social media, is that advantageous?
Well, here's
Very much so.
My deal was, you know, went with the History Press, and it's Arcadia Books, and they, you know, get it into Barnes & Noble, they get it on Amazon, they, you know, it's the Haunted America series, they have it on their website, they will go to, you give them a list of people in your community, and they will approach them and say, hey, would you like to carry this book? Which is all well and good, but when they sell your book, you get this tiny little sliver. And I have a background in marketing, and so it's like, I'm going to buy the book at a really deep discount, and I have experience on Etsy, so, and that takes, online payment and everything, very, very easy. And so I set up an Etsy page, and I set up a Facebook page, and I've done some Facebook advertising, pushing it out there, and working on content on social media. So I have a Haunted Ellicott City Facebook page that has 500 members or whatever, and if I put up something interesting, people share it, and then I get more members. And I've been hey, get your book for Christmas and everything. And I just recently did a promotion with a local photographer, did a great photograph of Ellicott City, and I got the rights to do it just for my own personal thing. Well, techie klutz that I am, I double ordered it. So I said, hey, I have these extra ones, would you mind if I sold them? Or what? He said, yeah, fine, if you make profits, donate it. So what I did was, I ran a promotion. I said, order the book today and I'll give you 3 holiday cards by Jeffrey Baker, and that seemed to goose the sort of whatever. And I think, I was talking to Michael before, that's the thing of, online, I know you've sold things that you can't sell it for less than Amazon.
Correct.
Well, the trick is, my Etsy books, they're signed. You can't go to Amazon and get a signed book to, your grandma. But you order from me, and you can get that.
Is that an incentive? Is that an incentive that works?
Yes. Anything that you can make special. I was talking to Michael to say, he has this book where it's set in Ellicott City, and there are various things that are happening. It's like, here, self-publish a little, a map of Ellicott City, and this is where this murder occurred. This is where this person was found. Cheap, and then you can, instead of $10, you can charge.
She's good.
$18, and just make it. I mean, if you're selling it online, make it special that you can, sure, go to Amazon, you can get it for $5 less, but you can't get it signed.
So you were talking about how you sell the product and you get a tiny little sliver based on what the publisher is doing, what deals they're working on. So then when you're self-publishing, what's the difference there? I mean, like, how much of a cut is being taken? How
I
much
think
are
you get
making?
slightly more with KDP. So my book sells for $12, and I get about $2.30 when they sell a paperback copy. And you can price them whatever you want when you sell them. The ebook sells for $3.99, and I get a little bit more than $2 of that.
But you've got to do 100% of the marketing by yourself. Like Shelley is, she's being a little bit, she's going the extra distance.
Right.
Where I guess, there is a marketing team there for you already.
And they support, like, they'll send out posters if you have a book signing and things like that, and, depending on how, active you are and everything. But it's still, I mean, for me, I did an earlier book, Images of America, Howard County, with the Historical Society, and that was all completely through them and no independent sales, so I didn't even worry about that. But when you see that you get the sliver, the couple bucks, that I can buy, if I buy enough of them, I can get them at 54% off, and so that makes sense. And I can, and I've gone to local, the Great Harvest Bread Company, and she said, I'd like to carry some. And a lot of times local people are like, I don't want to spend, because publishers say, I need you to buy a carton of them.
Right.
And I said, here, I'll give you 5, I'll sign them, and I'll give them to you on consignment.
Yep.
You sell it at 20, you give me 15, you keep 5.
So being that anyone can self-publish at this point, what is the benefit to then finding a traditional publisher? What is different there?
You're talking about it like it's a choice. Unless you really have an in, unless you really know somebody, self-publishing is pretty much all you got. So I've published 2 books, and in both cases I tried to go the traditional route. There are websites out there that have databases of literary agents, and each one specializes in a particular genre. And so you find a literary agent that matches what you've done. In my case, it's historical fiction. And then you send out these things called query letters. And it's like applying for a job. So typically when you apply for a job, usually you send out these resumes and you don't hear anything back. Occasionally you'll get a form letter response saying thanks but no thanks. And then occasionally you get a nibble. So in both cases, I sent out about 100 query letters. And for my first book, I got, I think, 2 nibbles, which didn't pan out. In my second book, I got no nibbles until I had already self-published. And then once you're self-published, they don't want to talk to you. So it's the idea of taking a self-published book and then taking it to a mainstream publisher, apparently they don't want to do that.
Well, because it's already been released,
Yeah,
right?
right.
And typically, I think that sometimes they'll pick up one that's been self-published if it's sold like 10,000 copies
Sure.
or so. So it's definitely that barrier to getting into the industry is very, very high. Especially, it's a little bit lower if you're doing nonfiction, and something that sort of fits into a tidy
category,
slot. It's much more difficult if you're writing fiction, just because there are a lot of writers out there who want to get published, and the market is small. So you know, there's a lot of work to get into the industry, and then even once you're there, that's not like a guarantee of success. I think that what I was doing the whole, you know, query letter process for a long time, and I started to hear all of these stories about writers who they'd found an agent, their agent had even found a publisher in some cases, and then everything fell through, either because the publisher went under or they just weren't able to even find a publisher in the first place. And then here you are, you're a writer, and you have this thing that you've written, it's done, you want people to read it, and you just have to sit on it for 5 years potentially, and then nothing happens with it. To me, that was just not an option.
Me too.
To me, I was like, I want people to read this, and even if that means taking on some of the challenge and some of the responsibility myself, it's essential that I reach the people who are going to enjoy this. And you know, it's definitely a situation where, especially with this first book, I'm probably not going to, you know, get much profit after, you know, getting the cover design and getting the interior layout and everything done. But I'm starting to reach the people who like what I make, and I have more books that I want to write. And so to me, the most important thing is getting it out there, and then getting the next one out there too, and just finding more and more of that audience. And that's you know, that's always the tricky question, because there is so much material out there. There's so much for people to read, and even I, as a reader, find that it can be really difficult to find that next thing that I'm really going to love, because there's so much and there's such a huge variety. And so yeah, that's always a big question, and it's always a big challenge, is finding that audience, because it can be, especially with writing, so very specific.
And that's the question, is it more difficult to find an audience now that there is so much more product out there? You know, it's not just with publishing,
Yes.
it's also with music, it's
Yes.
also with
Yes, very
film.
much.
There's so many platforms to do things out there.
It's more difficult to find an audience no matter what you're doing now. I mean, choice is the enemy of that. But there's barriers on both sides of the industry. If you go the traditional publishing route, there's a large factor of luck involved. Your book might go through the best agent in the world, it might go to the best publisher in the world, but at the end of the day, it's going to sit on somebody's desk, and you have to make sure that one person enjoys the book on that specific day to get published. But then you're in a bookstore with a publisher's name, publisher imprint on your book, and people will pick it up just because of that. Self-publishing, 10 million people are doing it right now. And there's no editorial control on it. So readers are wary.
Yeah.
See, I think you have to create a destination. You know, when I did Haunted Ellicott City, I was writing, and I was like, I wonder if the LLC is available. Ding ding, I'm going to get the LLC. I'm going to get the website.
I tell you, she's good.
So what I'm doing, it's Haunted Ellicott City is the wedge thing into it, and I have, you know, the LLC is books, art, oddities, and experiences. And we're going to be doing a haunted pajama party, dead of winter, at an inn, which you're going to come to.
Awesome.
And, you know, just sort of more reasons that if you're interested in spooky stuff, if you're interested in Ellicott City, you know, it's a place that you can go to and say, oh, I came for the book, but ooh, look, there's a movie made about one of the stories. And it becomes a a bigger thing. You have more tentacles out there. So it's just not, I want to read a book about a female protagonist in a science fiction, fantasy sort of thing. It's just a whole world that you can create. So do you have a website?
I have my Facebook page, yeah, and I'm on Twitter. I do have a website. It's
in progress.
Yes, yeah. Well, and it's I do blog posts and stuff.
Perfect.
Yeah, but I need to do it more frequently.
Yeah, because I mean, I just know when I do stuff on social media, because you can track, you know, visits to Etsy, insights on your Facebook page. It moves the needle, and you know, it's a numbers game. The more people who see your stuff, more likely to buy it.
You can take some control of that with the genre you're working in. I mean, there's a big interest in the paranormal. There's a big interest in young adult science fiction right now. That's why I chose to write in the blockbuster field of Western mysteries. That's probably been the hardest sell. It's just the genre I'm working in.
Well, now that Amazon has a brick and mortar store, it might be easier for self-publishers who self-publish on Amazon to get it into at least that store.
That's true. And, you know, coming at this from the filmmaking perspective, you know, I realize it's different from being a novelist or, you know, being a writer on whatever level that is. But there is that entrepreneurial aspect that is necessary, whether you have a traditional publisher or you're going an atypical route and doing it yourself. And atypical, you know, prior to now, obviously, everything has completely changed.
Yeah.
But the amount of work that goes into it, I mean, is it worth it? Do you feel that the work creating the art, but then the work that's necessary to push the art out there, is it worth it? Do you find your audience?
I write because I have to write. I don't write to sell. I never expected to sell any of my books because they're odd man out books. They're different. They're nonfiction, and they're not something that the general public would read. I was very proud to have gotten my genealogical study into the Smithsonian Library, because the hardest thing to do is to get your book into a library, more so than getting it into a store. And so that's all that I cared about. I will probably never sell any books, and I have another one that I'm writing now. But I write because I've been writing since I was about 11 or 12, and I'm addicted to research and writing.
And as romantic as it sounds to say I write because I have to write, I absolutely believe you when you put out a book that is written by anonymous. Is there a reason why you didn't put your name on the cover?
Well, first of all, there's another person involved. I traveled with my roommate, and so I wrote the book without her knowledge. So it's S and C in the book. She has since read it and she liked it. But there's a lot in the book that, at the time I wrote it, I didn't want people to know who it was.
Gotcha. Well, again, you are, you know, sort of an outlier in that respect. That, you know, you're writing because you have to write and because you're just, you know, satisfying that creative itch or whatever.
But I think just about any writer will tell you the exact same thing. It's not a choice. You write because you have to write.
You
if
do,
nobody
absolutely.
ever read my work, I'd still be writing it.
Right, exactly.
Absolutely. But then there is that artist's desire to share what you've done.
Yes.
You know, I mean, there's one thing to say, well, I'm not in it for the money. And I don't think any of us, whether that is writing books or making films, you know, if money was the primary motivating factor, you know, we should all just hang up our heads. But
Get an engineering degree.
Get an engineering degree,
We'd
exactly.
be in computer science.
But we do want our work to be appreciated, and we do want to share that. So
I buy my books with now that Amazon allows you to have the author price. I buy them and I send them out to all my friends.
Yeah, that's what everybody's getting for Christmas this year.
well, if you could one more time look into the camera for me and plug your work. Tell people what you've written, where they can find it, where to check it out, please.
Innocence Abroad, Amazon.com, by Anonymous, and Erik, Edward Palmer, The Man and His Family, which is a genealogical study, also Amazon.com, by Gayle Yiotis. That's under my name.
A Wicked Little Town is a murder mystery graphic novel set in the Old West by me, K. Patrick Glover, and artist Keith Perkins. You can also find my new work at thelastvestige.com, which is a post-apocalyptic blog.
Cool. Haunted Ellicott City, you can get it at Barnes & Noble, at Amazon.com. But why? When you can get a signed copy by going to Haunted Ellicott City on Etsy. And you can just Google it on Etsy and you can get it signed to anybody you like. And you might get a special offer. So I look forward to signing one for you soon.
My name is Michael Maloney. I have a website, michaelmaloneyauthor.com. I have 2 books out there. The most recent one is called Mile Marker 10. It's a murder mystery historical fiction set in Ellicott City in the year 1908 and it's based upon real events.
And I'm Megan Morgan. My novel is The Altered Wake, and it's a young adult science fiction fantasy. It's a lot of fun. And I am currently working on the second book, The Altered Rise, so it's part of a series. And I'm excited for people to have started reading it, and yeah, I can't wait for more people to read it.
Excellent. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for being here. I realize we only just sort of scratched the surface and we could go on about this for much longer, but we're not going to because I'm getting the flag signed and we are wrapping up. I'm getting the finger of doom. They're going to turn up the orchestra and shout me down here. So, at any rate, ladies and gentlemen, thank you again. I appreciate you putting up with me. I'm not Laura Hartman. I'm Erik Christopher Myers, and thank you for checking this out. Check us out online at potlucks.something and it's right here at the bottom of the screen. Obviously, I'm spun up
or
on
at the top.
So, thank you again. Appreciate it.